The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time wasn't just another game. It defined our childhoods, let's be honest, okay? I was 9 years old and I remember racing across Hyrule Field, calling Epona with her song, exploring forgotten temples, and finally standing face to face with Ganondorf himself. But what if the version we remember was never the complete experience? What's up, gamers? Welcome to Level Up Gaming. I'm Alonso, and if you're new, make yourself at home because we've got something awesome to check out today. The original wasn't limited only by its graphics, it was limited by the Nintendo 64 itself, forcing some of its darkest ideas to stay hidden beneath blurry textures and simple polygons. Today's hardware removes those limits completely. We all remember Dead Hand as one of gaming's most unsettling bosses. But what if Dead Hand wasn't the scariest thing Nintendo originally imagined? What if it was only the beginning? A modern remake now has the power to reveal the horror that was always buried inside Ocarina of Time, transforming one of gaming's greatest adventures, if not the greatest adventure in gaming history. I said it, come at me. It could become the most terrifying Zelda ever created. Okay? On the surface, it still looks like the adventure we all know. A young hero leaves the forest, claims the Master Sword, and sets out to save Hyrule and the princess. But beneath that familiar story, something much darker has always existed. Every dungeon, every cursed location, and every forgotten corner quietly hints at a kingdom built on tragedy, fear, and unspeakable history. Back in 1998, that's right, I was born in 1989, the Nintendo 64 simply couldn't show everything the developers imagined. Much of the horror lived inside our own imagination, and modern remake no longer has that limitation. It can finally bring those nightmares into full view, turning familiar locations into places that feel genuinely disturbing. Okay, I'm talking like post-apocalyptic Hyrule, and it all begins somewhere we've already visited. A dungeon that was always far more horrifying than most players ever realized. Let's start with a place that first hinted Ocarina of Time wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Lord Jabu Jabu's belly. Hey, as kids we accepted the idea without thinking twice. Giant fish had swallowed Princess Ruto, and somehow the solution was climbing inside to rescue her. Sounds simple enough, its bright, it's colorful, cool. It was strange, confusing, and unlike anything else in the game, really. But the Nintendo 64 softened what was really there. Beneath those blurry textures was something far more disturbing than most of us realized at the time. A modern remake wouldn't need to hide any of it. Instead of simple pink walls and repeating textures, Jabu Jabu's belly could become a living organism. And everything is trying to kill you. Every surface could pulse with wet, organic movement. Thick veins could spread across the walls while digestive fluids slowly drip from the ceiling. The air itself could feel heavy, humid, and almost impossible to breathe as the constant rhythm of a gigantic heartbeat echoes through every chamber. And then were the enemies. Oh, the enemies. You remember those strange tentacles hanging from the ceiling? They were unsettling enough in 1998 in a pixelated polygon shape, but with modern graphics they could become writhing parasites burrowing through living flesh before suddenly bursting out to attack. Every encounter could feel less like fighting monsters and more like surviving inside a creature that's desperately trying to digest you alive. Suddenly Jabu Jabu's belly wouldn't be just a weird dungeon everyone remembers. It would be nightmare fuel. Okay, it could become one of the most uncomfortable locations Nintendo has ever created. And if they were willing to push the horror this far inside a giant fish, imagine what they could do with a place that was already designed to frighten players from the very beginning. You know what I'm thinking. You know what I'm thinking. Even the locations that relied more on atmosphere than monsters could become far more terrifying. That's right, the Forest Temple. Forest Temple has always been one of the greatest dungeons in gaming, okay? It gave us Phantom Ganon, it gave us music, lore, its twisted corridors, haunting soundtrack, and abandoned halls created a feeling that something unseen was always watching you. It wasn't loud horror, it was a slow psychological dread. A modern remake could finally let that atmosphere reach its full potential. By the way, it was the first dungeon that you step into as an adult Link. Meaning, I don't know, is there a message there? Fully mature, the vibe of the game, everything changes into a much more dangerous, dark, feel that you had before? Imagine stepping into the entrance hall as realistic lighting struggles to push back the darkness. Every flickering torch would cast moving shadows across the walls, making statues and broken pillars seem almost alive. When the Poe sisters steal the flames, you know what I'm talking about. That's my best impression of it. The room wouldn't simply become darker. It could be swallowed by an oppressive blackness, forcing you to rely on tiny shafts of colored light filtering through the stained glass windows just to find your way forward. And then there are the Wall Masters. For countless players, those giant hands were already nightmare fuel. I mean, you're walking around, you see your shadow's getting bigger, the music's getting more intense, and then all of a sudden you have this unattached hand chasing you. You would hear that music change, and your feet would grow, or that shadow would grow, and you would panic before looking up. You would move out of the room. I remember I did. I would roll out of the room. Modern hardware could transform that unforgettable moment into one of the greatest jump scares in gaming. Imagine hearing scratching above you before a grotesque decaying hand crashes through the darkness, its cracked fingernails scrapping around the stone as it reaches for Link. Forest Temple wouldn't need cheap scares to become terrifying. Every hallway, every locked door, and every flickering shadow could make you question whether you're truly alone. And if that familiar dungeon could become this disturbing, the places built around death and suffering could become something far darker than Nintendo has ever attempted before. Think about it. Now we reach the darkest part of Ocarina of Time, the bottom of the well in the Shadow Temple. Long before modern gaming embraced darker stories, these locations quietly hinted at something horrifying. The game itself even warns us. Here is gathered Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred. That single line transformed these dungeons into something much more sinister than ordinary temples and inspired years of theories about their true purpose. Let me know in the comments down below right now. Was it chilling enough for you to stop for a second and doubt, do you want to go into that well? Definitely was for me. Just saying, okay? One of the most chilling theories suggests these weren't simply forgotten ruins at all. They may have been torture chambers used by the Sheikah to interrogate and execute enemies of the royal family. I mean, even on the Nintendo 64, the fake walls, rusted guillotines, and dark stains strongly hinted at a violent history the hardware could never fully depict. The 3DS version even toned down some of those unsettling details, but a full remake? Well, a full remake could easily restore and dramatically expand that forgotten horror. And it would be amazing. Instead of walking across a flat stone floor, every step through the bottom of the well could echo over cracked bones and scattered skulls. The walls wouldn't simply suggest forgotten victims anymore. They could become horrifying monuments covered with detailed carvings of suffering, making every corridor feel haunted by the people who never escaped. Then, I was going to say there's the Shadow Temple itself, but before we move to the Shadow Temple itself, can you imagine the creature from the bottom of the well popping up for the first time? You know what I'm talking about. A couple of hands from the floor. Once you take those hands out, Big Mama comes out in that slimy, horrific face that would just... oh my goodness. Okay, but I digress. Then there's the temple, the Shadow Temple itself. Modern lighting, realistic audio, and detailed environments could easily transform it into one of Nintendo's most terrifying creations. Whispers could surround you from every direction from the beginning of the temple. Every hidden passage could feel alive. And when you use the lens of truth, you wouldn't simply reveal invisible enemies, you'd expose the horrifying reality hidden beneath the illusion. At that moment, the remake would stop hinting at darkness and finally embrace it and force players to confront it head on. And then there's a creature. That creature. Almost every Ocarina of Time fans remember, okay? And I briefly talked about it, the dead hand. For many players, this was the exact moment the game stopped feeling like a call for fantasy adventure. You walked into a silent, wide room, strange hands reached from up the ground. Then that horrifying creature slowly crawled towards you. Even with the Nintendo 64's limited graphics, it became one of the most starring horrifying and unforgettable bosses in gaming. Now imagine Nintendo rebuilding it without those technical limits. That hand wouldn't just be a pale, shapeless mama monster anymore. Its skin could look clammy and stretched, unnaturally tied across a twisted body that barely resembles anything human. We're talking something Silent Hill here. Those endless hands wouldn't simply grab Link, they could claw into him with cracked fingernails and skeletal fingers that feel disturbingly real every time they emerge from the earth. And then, instead of a simple jaw opening and closing, a modern remake could reveal scarred flesh, lifeless eyes, and a mouth that barely looks capable of existing. Every movement could be accompanied by snapping bones, stretching tendons, and sickening sounds that make every attack feel painfully real. The entire encounter could become less about defeating a boss and more about surviving one of Nintendo's most horrifying creations. That hand terrified millions of players despite what the Nintendo 64 couldn't show. A modern remake finally has the power to reveal exactly why that nightmare has lived in our memories for nearly 3 decades. If that hand was the nightmare hiding beneath, the bottom of the well, then Bongo Bongo is the nightmare that escaped it. The nightmare that escaped it. Shadow Temple's boss has always been one of Zelda's greatest mystery. A massive eye, 2 severed hands, giant drum echoing through complete darkness, right? Nintendo never explains exactly what Bongo Bongo is, and somehow that only makes that encounter even more disturbing. I mean, equip your golden boots and then slit for a second, and you are literally panicking because you're close to the hand now. For years, one fan theory has refused to disappear. Some believe Bongo Bongo was once a prisoner locked beneath Hyrule, a man whose hands were cut off before his execution, leaving behind every spirit consumed entirely by rage and hatred. Whether that theory is true or not, the design fits almost perfectly. And a modern remake finally has the technology to make that story feel horrifyingly believable. Imagine those enormous, severed hands crashing into the arena with brutal force, every impact shaking the floor beneath Link's feet. The drumming wouldn't simply be background music anymore. It could become a thunderous heartbeat that grows louder and louder with every passing second, making the fight feel more like you're trapped inside the rage of a tortured soul than battling another dungeon boss. I know, Nintendo and what and ratings and what, but that single floating eye could become impossible to ignore. Instead of a simple weak point, it could stare directly at you with a terrifying intensity, silently telling the story of a spirit that has suffered for centuries. Suddenly, the battle isn't just another boss fight, it's a terrifying conclusion to Hyrule's darkest chapter, and proof that Ocarina of Time always carried a horror story beneath its heroic adventure. When we look back, and I love looking back at the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, most of us remember the adventure. Remember exploring Hyrule, solving puzzles, conquering dungeons, and saving the kingdom as well as Princess Zelda. But hidden beneath all those memories was something much, much darker. Every temple, every monster, and every forgotten corner carried a sense of dread that the Nintendo 64 could only partially bring to life. Before I continue, let me hit you with a clue. If you get it, well, there might be a surprise there for you, Nintendo and Legend of Zelda fan. What was the name of the boss that first you faced in Ocarina of Time, but it was not the first time that you faced in Legend of Zelda lore? Twilight Princess then remodeled that exact same boss. It actually has been seen in numerous entries of the franchise. I'm talking about a multiple-legged friend, and that's the only thing that I say. Now, Nintendo finally has the technology to reveal what was always there. From the living nightmare inside Jabu Jabu's belly, to the suffocating atmosphere of the forest temple, from the horrifying secrets buried beneath the bottom of the well, to the unforgettable terror of a dead hand and Bongo Bongo. And don't even get me started on those zombies. Every one of these moments already existed. Modern hardware simply has the power to make us experience them the way they were always meant to feel. And that's what makes this remake just so exciting. It isn't just another chance to replay one of gaming's greatest adventures. It's an opportunity to rediscover it through completely different eyes. Familiar locations could become genuinely unsettling. They were already unsettling before, though. Scarring children one at a time. Childhood memories could transform into unforgettable nightmares, let's be honest. The world we've loved for decades could suddenly feel completely unfamiliar again. The original Ocarina of Time will always remain one of the greatest games ever made. But if Nintendo fully embraces the darkness that has always lived beneath its surface, this remake won't just update a classic. It could finally become the horror masterpiece it was always capable of being. For decades, we remember Ocarina of Time as one of the greatest adventures ever created. Again, for me, the greatest adventure ever created. But maybe we've been remembering only half the story. Hidden beneath the hero's journey was a world filled with forgotten prisons, cursed temples, living nightmares, if you will, and creatures that terrified an entire generation of 9-year-olds despite the hardware holding them back. The Nintendo 64 just couldn't fully show that darkness, could it? The Nintendo Switch 2 can. And that's why this guy is gotta buy a Nintendo Switch 2 now. That's what makes this remake so fascinating, to be honest. It's just an opportunity to rebuild one of gaming's greatest masterpieces. It's a chance to finally reveal everything the original could only suggest and play it the way that it was meant to be played. Every shadow can become darker, every monster more disturbing, every dungeon more oppressive. The fear that once lived entirely inside our imagination can finally become real. And that's the biggest reason this remake matters to us here at Level Up Gaming. It isn't just because Ocarina of Time is returning, it's because for the very first time, we'll get to experience the version that the hardware could never truly bring to life and show you what it was meant to be. Don't click away just yet, by the way. I've got another video waiting for you that every gamer needs to see. Trust me, you're going to want to watch this one, okay? Oh, there it is. The legend isn't changing. The nightmare is finally catching up. Until next time, keep your boots on and keep your FPS high, your ping low, and your gaming skills even higher. And you might just be the next person to lift that Master Sword. I'll see you in the next one.